Welcome back to Small Town Sound, the podcast where we celebrate directors doing big things in small communities. I'm your host, Steve Brown. Today's guest is someone whose work has become a national example of what's possible in small school music education. Matt Martindale is a sole director of bands in Columbiana Middle School and Shelby County High School in rural Alabama. Since taking over the program in 2018, Matt has transformed it through innovative recruiting, community advocacy, and unwavering commitment to making music education accessible to every student. Matt, thank you very much for being on here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. What can you tell us a little bit about your community? Tell us how big it is, where it's located, just general things like that.
So Columbiana is a the town itself is around 42 to 4,500, based off of what you're looking at. The town itself, our school also feeds in two other communities, the Shelby, Alabama community, which is around 1,000 people, and then the Wilsonville area as well, which has about 1,800 or so. So total, we're around 7,500 population that feeds into the area for the school. The high school is around 560 to the largest it ever was when I was there was right at 600. But we average around 560 to 570 every year. And then the middle school itself is almost 400 students that feed into it. Columbiana is about a 40 to 45 minute commute to downtown Birmingham, which is the largest metropolitan area in the state. So we're just on the outskirts of, the major metropolitan area, and a majority of my parents and everything work in the Birmingham metro area, but decide to live farther out into more of a country rural setting. So
now, when you grew up, did you come from a small community like this, or did you come from a bigger community?
Nope, I came from the Hoover High School, the biggest school at the time in the state. Our marching band program was 300 plus. Now currently Hoover's band program is one of the state's perennial Bands of America competitors, and their jazz bands performed at Midwest 3 times and all sorts of stuff. So I came from the absolute polar opposite of what I teach at now.
So that intrigues me. I grew up in the town that I teach at. My community is about 3,200 people in my town, and then kind of like you, there's about 7,000 people that feed into our community for a high school. But I came from here. I knew exactly what it was. I knew what to expect. What was that like for you to come into a high school and a grade school that was just completely different?
It did take some, getting used to it prior to coming to this school. The other schools that I taught at, the one previous to it was a larger school, but still not like huge in any capacity. But it did take a little bit of getting to know how a small town operates, and learning how, it's not the same, but it is the same. Good mentors have said, like, students are students no matter where they are. They're going to learn the same way. They're going to learn whatever you put in front of them. And so I took the skills that I knew from those big schools that I grew up in and went to college in and everything else, and applied those same principles to a small town program. And then it revolutionized the way that they do things. Not saying that prior to me that wasn't the case. I inherited a great program that had good music, whole backbone to it. The previous director before me had been there for 18 years. You don't stay at a place for 18 years and not have success along the way. So the cupboard wasn't bare. It was just about renovating the cupboard.
Sure. Yeah, we have a mutual friend in Stan Mulden, and he's constantly saying that no matter where you're teaching, as long as you're building strong fundamentals and doing those every single day, you're going to have a good program. So do you find that to be the same in your community?
Yes, I mean, we spend every day on fundamentals. I do a lot of things that Stan taught me along the way, through conversations and clinics and whatnot. And Stan's also a guy that he'll let you send a recording of your band he wants to hear it day one. He says, let me hear it day one, not hear it day 90 and see what it is. Because he wants to advance it through fundamentals. And if you can harp into your students about fundamentals, then you can do anything at that point.
Sure. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about influences. So I always like to ask, what made you want to be a band director, and maybe that's a person, or maybe that's a certain event, or what happened in your life that you thought, man, music is my path.
Well, I mean, there's actually a weird combination of people that made me into a band director. So, my middle school band director was Kim Bain, and she is known across the country for her teaching of middle school band. Her band at Pizzitz performed at Midwest in 2015. And, so she taught me how to play my instrument when I first started. And then when I got to high school at Hoover, another female teacher was Sally Vines White, who was my jazz band director, and she taught me to love jazz, and which then got me really involved with playing my instrument. And like I said, her groups performed 3 times at Midwest after I was gone and graduated. But those two really got me hooked on the music side of it. But it even dates farther back to that about the music side of it. My dad played tenor sax growing up in Arkansas. He was actually second chair to Bill Clinton in the Arkansas All-State Band. And so I grew up around that with an instrument in my house playing. And then on top of that, my mom was a teacher. She was a history teacher. So kind of it all concluded together to get me to go off to college and be like, do I want to do this? And then I think it was the first day that I was at college marching band. And I said, yeah, I think this is what I want to do. So it was just this process of all these different individuals giving me these ideas of like, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. Well, that's great. You've done some incredible things with your program, and one of the things that I read about you that just fascinates me is that is it true that your beginning students do not pay for anything that they have throughout that first year?
Well, they pay for a band fee, but that goes for their t-shirt and their polo shirt and, supplies throughout the year. But their instrument and supplies like their book and all that stuff is provided free. So that endeavor started in 2019, my second year at the school. We kind of were, when I took the job in 2018, it was, like I said, it was a very good musical program. They had just kind of fallen on some hard times and numbers were down. I think prior to 2018, even 2016, 2015, at the high school in the marching band, there were 100+ students in the marching band. But my first year I got there was 67 students total in the entire program from 6th grade to 12th grade. And so it was, we need to rebuild our numbers some way. So that first year I did the traditional try to recruit through the 5th grade and build it up. And it wasn't working. And the biggest feedback I got was band's too expensive. It's too expensive for me to invest in buying an instrument for my child and whatnot. So I went to the drawing board of how do I do this? And there was a opportunity that was sent through email that there was this Alabama Arts Alliance grant that was up to $20,000 for you to create a project. And so I went to their meeting and they were talking about it, and they said, your project can be anything you want it to be. It could be bringing in a guest artist. It can be this, that. And so my idea, they said, what you need to do is approach it as what superpower are you going to bring to your community? And so my superpower was going to be to give them an instrument. And along the way, that superpower then leads to them being more entrenched in the school. Attendance comes up because they want to come to school for band and whatnot. and we received the grant. It was $20,000. 16,000 of it could be used to buy new instruments, repair existing instruments, and various things. And at the middle school, there was a stockpile of these instruments that had been left from years and years and years. So the first thing I did is took all those instruments, made sure that nobody wanted them, and they all said that they were donated to the program and whatnot. So sent those out. That was about $5,000 to get a bunch of things repaired, and then the rest was used to buy new instruments that were needed, like tubas and some French horns and things like that weren't in supply at the middle school. And then COVID hit right as we got all the securing for that grant. So, but even then, when we were doing digital recruiting for 2020, I was still able to get more students signed up for band by saying it's free, give it a shot, than in previous years. And then we were able to apply for that again the next year at the middle school. We got another $20,000 to enhance it from there. And then we were able to do it at the high school as well, because it was two separate schools. Even though I was the same director, I was able to get $40,000 at the middle school, $40,000 at the high school to just overall enhance the entire program. And so that was kind of the genesis of getting the whole thing there. And now that we're into year 7 of the program, my seniors this year are the 6th graders that started in 2020 with the whole program. And we've gone from 67 students to this year on my rosters with my auxiliary units, there's 142 students.
That's incredible. Congratulations on that. And what a creative way to just get kids into the band room. And we all know, once you get the kids into the band room, a lot of them have a tendency to just hang out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I said with my auxiliary students too, we have 14 girls on our high school auxiliary, and we also have a middle school auxiliary line that doesn't do marching band with us. But of those 20 or so girls, I think maybe, I can't think of the number off the top of my head, but 6 or 7 of them are in band as well, playing an instrument and a part of it as well. So it kind of has built its own thing, and band's a thing now in town again, and everybody talks about it. Everybody knows me. I walked into the pizza parlor the other day and I didn't even have to say my name. They just handed me my box. I don't even know who the guy was. They just know who I am at this point. So it's one of those things that you don't get in a big town setting all the time. And so it's beneficial for you to see that you're making an impact beyond just, the band class period that those kids have.
Yeah. So obviously you've been able to purchase an inventory of instruments. So do those instruments just carry over with those kids until they decide, that they're no longer going to play, or they graduate out of the program?
Well, the program is just for that first year, and everybody goes into it that first year knowing that I get this. So I get a 1-year lease on this instrument to give it a shot, and as a result, I mean, most get hooked as it is, and I think we have about, from year 1 to year 2, we have about an 85-90% retention rate with kids coming back into the program and going from there. Now, there is also still the scenario of the kid that's like, I want to do band, but my parents have said I can't afford an instrument. And because of that, we're able to, we have such a surplus of instruments at this point that I'm able to probably supply that kid, a 7th and 8th grader, another year on an instrument and get them even more hooked, and then eventually get with mom and dad more and be like, hey, rental program to get an instrument's only $30 a month. And I think this will be very beneficial for Johnny or whoever it is along the way. So, we're fortunate in that case that we've built it over these years, that we have the ability to not only nurture the beginners, but also continue the progression with some of those students that would normally fall through the cracks.
Yeah. That's great. So let's change gears a little bit here. I also noticed that you guys travel quite a bit. You guys have been to Disney World or are going to Disney World soon. You've been in a couple of really cool parades. in San Antonio, and I think you're going to the Thanksgiving parade in Philadelphia. Can you talk a little bit about your travel experiences and what that brings to your program?
So, when I arrived in 2018, it was the band had never gone on a trip before. And coming from a large school setting and where I was the previous years, I was like, we should go on a trip. And so we went on our first trip, my first year, to Gatlinburg, which from Birmingham to Gatlinburg, for those people that don't know, that's about a 5-hour bus ride. It's not that far. But it was a huge deal that we were able to do that. And then with partnership with our choir department and everything, we decided the next year that we were going to go to New York with the entire band. And then, of course, COVID happened, and then we didn't go on that. And then we recovered after a couple years, and then we started going to Disney and Universal. We did their clinics that you can do. And then I said, all right, it's time to take the jump, because I had a group that in 2022 that was young, but they were very good. Majority of the marching band that year was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And we had about 3 or 4 upperclassmen left over to fill out the ranks of the marching band, but they won best in class at all their competitions that year. And I was like, this is going to be the group that takes us to the next step. And so I reached out to the people in Chicago and gave them our audition tape and everything else. And before I knew it, we were in the Chicago St. Patrick's Day parade. And I was like, wow, I never expected that to happen that quickly. And then when we were about to leave 3 weeks before Chicago, I got a call from the parade committee that we were one of the 4 bands that they selected based off of our audition tape to be a live performance on their TV network. And so we were one of those groups, and they said, but the trick is we need you to play an Irish theme song. And we were playing my kind of town, Chicago, which is not Irish at all, but we were able to find a quick Irish tune, put it together in 3 weeks, and then go perform it in Chicago, which then that tape led us to getting into San Antonio, and then San Antonio led us to getting into Disney and Philadelphia and everything else. And so this December, we are marching at the Magic Kingdom for a small band. And for everybody that doesn't know, Disney usually doesn't accept small bands. They usually accept larger bands over 100 students. But based off of our quality and everything else, they accepted us for that. And then same thing goes for Philadelphia for the next Thanksgiving in 2027.
Yeah, one of the things that I like to tell young band directors is, submit a tape. I don't care what you're auditioning for, just audition. Right? There's no harm in it. There's nothing bad is going to happen to you, except for somebody may say no, but they may also say yes. And when they say yes, it's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't have just the ability to just try, then it's never going to happen. It takes 10 no's to get that first yes along the way. And then before you know it, that first yes then leads to the next one and the next one and the next one. And we're starting to see that with our program, year in and year out. When I apply for something, I'm like, well, we might have a shot at it because everything else has seemed to be working out for it. So not to say that there's been plenty of things that I applied the group for and we've been told no, and it stings, but then you move on to the next one.
Right.
So,
right now, do you tell your kids when you're all the time when they're told no? Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And I always tell my kids, I sometimes I don't want you guys to know those kinds of things. And if think that there's something to learn from it, then of course I'll tell you. But if not, I'll keep that to myself.
There was a big one that I told them no about. We weren't accepted to the Cherry Blossom Festival. It was actually the same year I applied for Cherry Blossom and Chicago, since they're about the same time of the school year. And we learned about Cherry Blossom right before we learned about Chicago. So it was kind of like bittersweet. I told them, guys, we didn't get accepted to Cherry Blossom. but we're going to figure out something really great for us. And then about 3 weeks later, it was, we're going to Chicago. And now they've completely forgotten about that. The kids that were in the program that are now juniors and seniors in the program, they don't even remember it at this point.
I in 2020, of course, February of 2020, everything looked like things were going to get canceled, and then of course we all know that everything did get canceled. But at the beginning of that month, I got a letter that said, they were going to invite us to something really cool, and I turned it down because we were already going to Disney that summer. And we had something in April, and I can't remember what it was. But anyway, I turned it down, and of course, 3 weeks later, everybody told, March 13th, I'll never forget that day. We were told that we're not coming back to school and it might be a while before we can come back to school. So that very next year, I told my principal, if we ever get offered anything, I want to accept it. And he was like, yeah, sure. Yeah. And of course, him being a principal, he's just being encouraging. But there was a time there where I was like, yep, we're going to do that. We're going to do that. We're going to do that. And then that wears on you too, and actually, I think it kind of wore on my kids, just keep doing. We went to New York, we went to Washington, D.C. That year we presented at Chicago. All of that happened in 1 year. And I was like, oh my gosh, we have to take a little bit of a break.
Yeah. I've talked with a number of colleagues about my future plans for the program, which include not just marching band performances, but possibly having our concert band, perform at our state convention or the Music for All festival in Atlanta is not a far trip over from us, but it'd be a good experience on a big stage for our concert program. But every colleague that I've had that's, in a larger program and everything, they talk about just the wear on the students, when you're doing that. And because if you're doing like our state convention is in January, you're preparing for that come summertime and you're doing marching band at the same time and you're doing all this. And they're at a big program where it's, the wind ensemble doing it, not just the band doing everything. And they talk about the wear on the kids, which, gives me pause for saying like, oh, we should do this and this and this and this and this. And so now it's about maybe choosing to pick our battles along the way a little bit more strategically as the years go by. So that way I don't overwhelm the kids, because just like you, it's, the band is the band. There isn't a wind ensemble, a symphonic band, a concert band for us to be able to divvy out the workload to. The clarinet section is the clarinet section when it comes to our programs. So,
yeah, I'm doing a clinic for our state convention in January, and one of the things that we're going to talk about is how I've got a group of probably 20 kids that I'm also the choir director at our school. So those 20 kids are in my jazz band, they're in my concert band, they're in my marching band, they're in my choir, my jazz choir, and they all play different instruments, and some of them play flute and concert band, but they'll play saxophone and jazz band. And it's a really cool thing to see, but it's also, I have to be very careful on not burning those kids out.
Yeah, I have 2 drum majors for our halftime show this year, just because the marching band's larger and we need a little bit more coverage, and just the way our halftime show's oriented. There's a flute solo, there's a saxophone solo, but they're both flute players. And they also both play alto and jazz band, like you were just saying. And so it was like, all right, flip a coin. Who's doing the flute solo? Who's doing the alto solo? And who's conducting at the same time? And we were working on the flute solo part this past week, our first week of band camp, because it's towards the very beginning of the show. And she was our head drum major, our only drum major last year, head drum major this year. And she was just like, how do I do this? And I was like, we're going to figure it out. I don't want you to freak out about it. We're going to figure it out. It will work out. It's worked out in my brain. We're going to physically figure this out. And then, just making sure that she doesn't get to the point that she's like, this is never going to work. And, keeping that workload manageable for her along the way. And then the other one has to literally get off her podium, go backfield, conduct, then come back, grab a saxophone, and then play a saxophone ensemble in the second movement of the show. So I said to the other girl, I was like, she literally has to get up, go across the field, come back and everything. All you got to do is turn around and pick up a flute. It's okay. We'll figure this out. But they're kids. Like Stan says, kids are kids no matter where they are.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I love talking to people. I'm in an area where the closest town to me is probably, I guess, 30 miles away, and they're also a small community. But then after that, it's even further away. So kind of landlocked a little bit, and it's hard for me to talk to other band directors. And one thing that this podcast has been doing for me is just like giving me some confidence when I talk to other people, and they're doing the same things that we're doing, and they're fighting the same battles, and they're winning in the same way. It's just really, really incredible for me anyway to talk to those people. So do you have other people? Do your students participate in other programs in the school that are not music related, like cheerleading or, football, baseball, things like that?
Well, yeah, they definitely do. Cause on top of being the band director, I'm also the varsity boys head soccer coach.
Nice.
So I have a lot of actually soccer players in my band program, to which is a blessing and a curse at the same time because, soccer season's in the spring.
Season?
No, it's in the spring in Alabama. So, we're able to balance it that way, which is also a reason why I shifted our trips from being those spring performances to this year, Disney being in the December, and then next year a Thanksgiving parade, to help me, because this past soccer season, legitimately soccer ended and a day later we were on the bus heading to San Antonio.
Wow.
So it was just this constant grind figuring it out. And the same thing for my students. Cause like I said, we have a bunch of boys in the soccer program. We have girls in the soccer program. My percussion section leader is the number one goalie in the state of Alabama right now for girls. So like she's balancing it all. Actually most of my battery is in the soccer program. It's actually kind of crazy. The girls soccer coach and I talked on Friday about off-season conditioning, working it around the band schedule. And she's going to do Mondays, and then we'll both do on Wednesdays when there is no marching band practice. And the band kids will only do Wednesdays because they'll have band on Monday, and trying to explain that to a bunch of 15 and 16-year-olds that like, hey, you don't get to go play your sport one day a week because you got to do marching band. They were all like, well, what can we do? And I was like, you'll be fine. We'll give you the workout. You just do it on your own. So balancing it all out, and on top of that, I'm also a school bus driver. I don't drive a route, but I drive the bus for all sorts of different things. But, back to the kids, got soccer players. I have kids that are involved in our art program. Our auxiliary sponsor is the art teacher. The kids are involved in everything, and balancing that with marching band and band in general is a tough thing. I listened to your first podcast with your students, that you did, and talking about them balancing sports and other things along the way. And I was like, yep, been there. And sometimes you got to give up your kid for half of a rehearsal because they got to go to theater practice or something like that.
Right.
And you'll hear from directors like, well, how can you do that? And they'll be fine. There's a reason why that kid's doing multiple things, that they know what they have to do to be successful. So I've never had an issue with a kid, not pulling their weight, even if they're not there for 50% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I have the same philosophy. Yeah, if a kid wants to do multiple things, they're the type of kid that's going to make it work. And you want that kid. You want that kid that's excited to do multiple things and have multiple talents. And I've just always related well to those types of students.
That's actually how we do recruitment is when we take the middle school band to the 3 elementary schools that feed into the middle school is I tell them, don't wear your band shirt. I want you to wear all your other activities.
Oh, what a great
Because
idea.
I want them to see that you can do cheerleading, you can be on the middle school color guard and majorettes, you can play football, you can be on the basketball team, you can play baseball, whatever it is. And then you of course have that kid that's like, well, what if I only do band? And it was like, then wear your band shirt. But there is something that you do. And then I'm like, even if it's not in the school, like we actually have a pretty large Brazilian contingent in our school. So a lot of them do jujitsu and things like that with their culture. And I'm like, wear something from jujitsu or something, show that you do something besides just play the trumpet. And so that way, that fifth grader says, oh, I can keep doing karate and I can do band. So it's a good recruitment tactic showing off that there's more than just playing the instrument that we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's go backwards a little bit. There was something I wanted to ask you about the Disney trips that you've been on. Have you done the instrumental workshops?
Yes, we did the Disney one and then we did the Universal one back-to-back years.
Sure. I've not done the Universal one, but I love the Disney one. I can't say enough good things about what they do at that clinic and the way my kids are energized after they get done with that clinic.
The Disney one was good. I actually preferred the Universal one the next year. It was a little bit more lively. I think maybe the year that we went was the first year after COVID. And so everything was kind of like, let's go a little slow with this and everything. And my kids liked the Universal one too, because they also learned about the behind the scenes of like Foley technique. So they were, literally taking the shoes and knocking them and making the sound effects along the way. And then they were doing the voices of trolls and things like that from the movie Trolls. Another thing being with when we did those trips, I had a mixed group of younger students at the middle school age and high school students coming together for those trips. Universal gives you music ahead of time. So with those younger kids, you can do a little bit of rehearsal before they show up, and it allows them that experience to be a little bit more about the experience versus, oh, I've got to learn this music really fast. But now that the program's is much more established, I think that the Disney clinic would be really cool, especially for my older kids, because you just get to go in there and read. That first like half hour is just like, let's read everything, which was mind blowing for a lot of my students back then, because that was that group that it was mainly 7th, 8th, and 9th graders, and they're still developing at that point. But that was my experience with it. And then this time we'll actually get to perform, which is something that's, really cool.
Yeah.
Especially Christmas. What was that?
Are you performing in a parade, or do you get to do a concert band performance too?
We're doing just the parade down, Magic Kingdom, down Main Street, USA. So, and it'll be the day that Christmas, everything's out, so it'll be really cool.
Yeah, that's going to be really cool. There's something about just marching by the castle that those kids, it doesn't matter if they're 18 years old and they're going to college in about 2 months, they still love it. I'll never stop doing those trips to Universal and to Disney.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bona fide Disney addict adult. I never was, and then with band trips and then with my own kids and taking them, and my wife got really into Disney. Now it's like a yearly thing for the Martindale household to be going to Disney World. And for us, it's only an 8-hour car ride down there. So it's not impossible for us to get there all the time. So.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Midwest. Midwest is when I was a young band director 25 years ago, that was an impossible feat. Like getting to do anything at Midwest was not in the cards for me. But you were chosen. You present, or you sent in your material to present, and you were chosen to present in December. Can you talk a little bit about the process to get there, and maybe a little bit about what your clinic's going to be about?
Well, Midwest, like you said, Midwest was always one of those things where it was like, that'd be great one day if I could, present, perform, whatever it is. Um, and along the way, the past 7 years of building what I've built in the program, each year it seemed more and more attainable. Just by talking to the people that I was around and going to other clinics at Midwest and everything, I was like, I've got some things I could help out some people with. And then, making those connections with Stan and Richard Crane and others along the way, throughout the years, it just led to the inevitability that, I should do this. I should just put myself out there. Cause like we said earlier, they could say no. That's fine. Nothing changed from when I started to now. It's, same thing. I can try again the next year. But also Midwest has also always been this like special moment for me each year, just like it is for every director. But my birthday is also always around Midwest. So Chicago's now become like my birthday destination, and everything along the way. And actually, back in 2017, I performed with the Alabama Winds at Midwest with the adult group there. And I think with performing there and then going year after year, I was just like, I think this is actually attainable for me. And so I put it out there. I said, this is what I've been doing. And sure enough, few months later, I was accepted. I had to read it. I had to read it a few times to make sure that it actually said you were accepted. But it was a surreal experience for sure.
Yeah. So it's funny because I have a picture of after Becky Warren, who you know as well and have talked to quite a bit. She called me and interviewed me for about 2 hours, and I had a friend here that teaches O'Fallon High School, which is a big program, right? About an hour and about 45 minutes away from us. And she kind of nominated me, if you can nominate somebody from Midwest. But she talked to Becky about my program and myself. And anyway, Becky called and we talked for 2 hours. I got off the phone and my wife was like, "So what did you talk about?" And I was like, "I don't really even remember. I think it's my program and, like what my
Yeah.
program has to offer." And then
Yeah.
about 2 months later, I got a notification on email that we were accepted. I have
Yeah.
a picture of me sitting with coffee on my couch. My hair is just like all over the place. I had longer hair. Hair is like all over the place. And I took a picture of me like right after I read it. And I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this just happened." And, of course, and then I called all of my kids and, made the announcement on Facebook. And it was really, really, really a cool time. I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we went to Chicago for the St. Patrick's Day parade, our warm-up location was right in front of the Hilton, which of course is where, Midwest Clinic began and everything. And my students knew that I went to the Midwest Clinic and I had given them kind of the idea of what it was. The analogy I always use is it's the Super Bowl of bands. Basically, if your group gets to go there or you present there, it's like you're at the Super Bowl. Basically, you're at the highest achievement in your career. And so we were warming up there, and it was this big performance for us in Chicago. And I said, "Guys, turn around. Do you see that building?" And I said, "That's a Hilton hotel." And I was like, "That means nothing to you, but that is where this Midwest Clinic that you hear me talk about all the time started." And the way we're going and the way we're building, we're going to be a part of that in some way in the future. Like I just feel it in my bones. And so now fast forward 3, 4 school years later, they are a part of it. It's me presenting, but I'm talking about them. I'm talking about our program. The seniors, like I said, they started this whole thing 7 years ago. I think I know of at least one, the drum major that I mentioned earlier. Her and her dad are coming up. She's going to do the leadership clinic the day before my presentation, and they just want to be there and be a part of it and see it. And it's one of those things. And for our school system, I'm the first representation of our school system at Midwest, and we have major programs in our school system that have, bands that have performed at our state level. One of the directors is our now president of our MEA and all sorts of different things. And I, at one of the smaller schools in our district, am the one that's presenting at the largest platform in our profession. So it's a cool thing for our kids. Even this past week at band camp, a number of them were asking me like, when is Midwest again? And so they're aware of it.
Yeah. So your clinic is titled Innovative Harmonies, Transformative Strategies for Music Education for Small School Single Director Programs. So can you tell us a little bit about your preparation, what we're going to hear whenever you present in December, and I know that 5 months of work is going to change, probably 100 times before you actually get there. But can you give us a little bit of what that's going to be about like now?
So the reason why it's called Innovative Harmonies is because we have to find that delicate mix of being the administrator and being the teacher. And so it's about, finding those strategies to find the funding. They're going to come away with ideas on funding, on teaching methods. I use a teaching method that I learned from growing up in Hoover, which is a huge football powerhouse. Our football coach, when I was there, basically instilled from Pee Wee on down that everybody ran the same offensive playbook. And so I apply that structure to the band world. Everybody from 6th grade to 12th grade is going to count the exact same way. Every 6th grader is going to do the same curriculum that the 7th graders did the previous year, and slight variations along the way, of course, but everybody is going to have this sequential sequence leading up to the point that we are in this whole system. There's also going to be, ways about advocating for what you're doing in your growth projects. If you are doing the things that I've been able to do in the program and you're growing by 20%, 30% to this year, 100% growth from year 1 to year 7, you've got to be able to get that word out to people and the ways in which you can do that. I've also noticed another colleague, Miss Allen, the famous Miss Allen on TikTok, is starting to put out for every state a list of grant opportunities for everybody. So I'm going to get with her and ask her, can I supply these at my clinic as well? Like, or pitch your website as well, because this is a great resource. I saw her Alabama one that she posted today and I clicked on it and there was one I was like, I didn't even know that one existed, but I'm going to apply for it. Because there's that harmony of finding the way to fund what you want to do, will lead to greater success as long as you're also putting in the teaching along the way.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to hear it. I can't wait to meet you in person there. Before we wrap this up, can I ask you to if there was a piece of advice that you would give either a younger version of you or a younger band director? What advice would you give to help them out in their first couple of years?
So this summer, I've actually had the great honor of getting 3 of my former student teachers jobs this summer and helping them along the way, being that final reference that was called for all 3 of them. And the biggest advice that I said to all 3 of them, and they're all different ages. I mean, even one is my age. He just happens to be my past student teacher because of just the way that he went around along his career path. But it's to be the director you are today. Don't be the director that you're going to be 16 years from now. Because the director you are today is the best that you can do for yourself and for your students. If you're trying to be the 20-year veteran, year 1, you're going to fail because you have a lot of learning to do along the way. And that's not saying that you're going to be a bad bad director by any means. But just basically give yourself limitations to your own self. Know that you're going to make mistakes and correct those mistakes, and it'll make you a better teacher along the way. So that way, when you get to year 16, like I'm in this year, it's a lot easier to appreciate the things that you did along the way versus having resentment for, trying to be year 16 at year 1. So slow down, appreciate the process along the way, because you're developing just like you're developing those students in front of you each day.
Yeah, what great advice that is. That's so awesome. I've interviewed 9 people now, I think, and you're the first person to say, slow down. Appreciate where you are right now. And that's great. It's absolutely great advice. Matt, this has been awesome. I mean, thank you so much for coming on here, and I can't wait until this airs out on all of the podcast platforms, and can't wait for people to hear it. Congratulations on being picked for Midwest, but more than that, congratulations on having such a great program.
I appreciate it, and thanks for having me on. And like you said, looking forward to meeting you in person in a few months from now.
Absolutely. And thank you all for watching and tuning in to Small Town Sound. If you've enjoyed hearing what we have had to say, subscribe to Small Town Sound and leave us a review. And share this episode with another music educator who believes that great bands can come from small towns. Until next time, keep making music, keep investing in kids, and keep proving that excellent has no zip code. We'll see you next time on Small Town Sound.